Parasite. Written by Alex Anderson. The ark thudded heavily into a pothole, and that impact resonated through me like physical pain. The engine, my only ally in this frozen world, coughed hoarsely, spat out a plume of blue-gray smoke, and died. The silence that followed was worse than the roar. Inside it, I could clearly hear the radiator metal ticking as it cooled, like someone invisible cocking a hammer, aiming right at the back of my head. I sat there, gripping the wheel until my knuckles turned white, and waited. 1 second, 5, 10. The world remained silent. The sky over Monte Silvano looked like an old bruise, dirty purple and oppressive. I stepped out, and the thick air immediately coated my throat with the taste of chalk. I wanted to spit, but my mouth was bone dry. The glass door of the pharmacy, hanging by a single hinge, grinned at me with its jagged shards. Trying not to breathe the dust, I stepped over the threshold. Inside, it smelled of iodine and the end of the world. I didn't dash around like a panicked amateur. At my age and in my position, greed kills faster than a bullet. Squinting in the gloom, I sorted through the boxes. Amoxicillina. My eyes frantically clung to the tiny print of the expiration dates. Antibiotics, fever reducers. This was currency stronger than gold now. My fingers trembled as I stuffed the blisters into my bag. Every crinkle of plastic sounded like a thunderclap. I froze just as my hand reached for a pack of gauze. A wet, slurping sound, like someone sucking the last of a thick drink through a straw. Someone was sitting there, behind the counter. A pale, translucent vein snaked down from the ceiling directly into the poor bastard's collar. It pulsed, living its own vile life. I watched a dark mass surge up through that tube in rhythmic jerks, making the veins on the man's neck bulge like black worms. His skin had stretched thin, pearlescent, like parchment. Then, a wet snap of tearing fabric hit my ears. The puppet's head jerked, turning toward me. Instead of eyes, cloudy lenses filled with tar. The thing began to rise, dragging ceiling tiles with it, permanently fused to its leash. It didn't growl. It exhaled the scent of an open grave right into my face. Long, unnaturally multi-jointed limbs scraped against the tile, snapping its own nails in a desperate attempt to reach me. Fear isn't when you scream, it's when your insides turn to ice. I backed away, bumped a shelf, and a bottle of peroxide rolled across the floor with a crash. That sound was the starting pistol. I spun and bolted for the exit, boots sliding on crushed glass and scattered pills. I tripped over the threshold, nearly hitting the asphalt face first, the smell of damp earth filling my nose. The key, that cursed piece of metal, wouldn't find the lock. My fingers, they were useless. "Come on," I wheezed, nearly breaking the lock. A sharp cramp seized my calf as the engine finally responded with a strained howl. I floored it, feeling no pain, only the need to get out. The Ark lurched, drenching the empty street in the stench of burning rubber. I drove without loosening my grip on the wheel. The cabin smelled of my own sour sweat, and in my ears, I could still hear it. That sound, the wet crunch of tearing human skin. The Ark crawled along the old service road, its gearbox whining in protest. Beneath the wheels, crushed limestone and dust. Beyond the glass, a world that had finally croaked. My personal slice of heaven was waiting ahead. The flooded quarry greeted me with its usual grim silence. Sheer white stone walls towered 30 meters high, turning the place into a giant concrete glass. At the bottom, 15 meters of icy, stagnant water. The perfect moat. Medieval lords and their castles would have died of envy. I rolled the rig onto the tongue, a rocky outcrop cut at a sharp angle. Brake, handbrake. The engine died, and the silence immediately began to press against my ears. My castle sat 15 meters from the shore, a rusty pontoon barge, 10 by 5, welded from honest Soviet iron. I took a steel hook on a cable. I threw my whole weight onto the manual winch lever. The metal groaned. The chain moved, reluctantly yielding the water. The pontoon drifted toward the shore, slow and inevitable as a tombstone. The clang of iron hitting stone, docking. I kicked down 2 heavy ramps, back behind the wheel. The Ark rolled heavily onto the deck. The pontoon tilted dangerously, taking on water. Then it leveled out, settling deep. The steel holds, for now. I took a long pole and pushed off the rock with all my might. Slowly, inch by inch, I drifted into the dead zone. I let out the chain until the barge stopped, exactly in the middle of the quarry. Now, to anyone left on the shore, I am an unreachable island. The sun had already dropped behind the quarry's edge, and darkness began to fill this stone pocket from the bottom up, like inky water. I looked overboard, and just a bit deeper, in the transparent icy mass, I saw them. Whitish silhouettes. The drowned. They didn't float to the surface. The water temperature kept them in a perpetual, vertical drift. The parasite inside hadn't finished its job yet, turning their tissues into jelly. They just hung there, staring into nowhere, while I walked over their heads. The ritual. You don't survive without it. I dusted the edges with chloride of lime, white powder on rusty iron, creating a chemical barrier. The things don't like sharp smells. It blurs their senses. I froze. For 10 minutes, I just listened. The echo is my best radar. The silence was absolute, save for the lap of water against the hull. An ordinary infected couldn't jump this far. If he decides to swim, he'll just join the collection of vertical buoys under my keel. The cold crept under my jacket. Time to go home. I locked the door, all 3 bolts. I flipped the switch. The interior was bathed in a dim, red light. Enough to see, but invisible from the outside. The Ark rocked slightly on the water. I'm home, still alive. To be continued.